All right, lovely people. Carl Sona back with my man Kofi for another episode of Coffee with Carl and Kofi. We are so excited to be here with y'all. We just jam record. And today officially marks episode 2 of our new series on Simon Sinek's The Infinite Game. Kofi, how are you feeling, brother?
Oh man, I'm feeling like absolutely amazing right now. It's been an awesome week, and then just diving into this infinite mindset. Like we were talking a little bit offline about how this has impacted our lives personally. So I'm hyped up to really get into this conversation today, brother.
Yeah, brother, man. It has completely shifted the way that I think about my personal healing, the
Mm,
way that I think about my business and entrepreneurial
mm-hmm.
progression or path to progression,
Mm-hmm.
the way I think about relationships, even,
Yeah.
man. And, for the folks that are just tuning in, we'd highly encourage you to go back to the episode from last week where we sort of set the stage for this concept of the infinite game mindset versus the finite mindset. So go back to that episode and listen and then join us on this one. But I've been thinking a lot about how this has shifted my overall approach to life, man. And I know that you
Mm,
have as well. You were just telling me about a story offline
yeah.
around your plans to go to DC that have now shifted.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I would say that right there embodies the infinite mindset.
Mm-hmm.
So today we're just gonna kind of get real with y'all, man. Vulnerability and the courage to lean into vulnerability are so critical in anything that you want to be successful in life
Thousand
when it comes
percent.
to transaction.
Yeah.
Cynic talks a lot about vulnerability and how
Mm-hmm.
it's required to really build an organization that adopts this mindset. So today Kofi and I are just going to be speaking off the cuff about how this concept is rearing its head in our lives right now. Kofi, I want you to take the
Yeah.
lead here because you're with me something that I think is a great example of this.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, in really thinking about the infinite mindset, I really, realized that it requires this very long-term view. It requires us, instead of thinking of things in like, you know, days, weeks, and months like most people are usually accustomed to, it really requires
Right.
to kind of transition your mindset to thinking of things in like years, you know, 5, 10, 15, 20 years and decades and time spans like that. So, as I was reading this book, one really huge transformation I had for me is, I discussed months ago, I was gonna, plan on transitioning from Richmond up to DC. I kind of envisioned myself, living in that space. I wanted to, upgrade my lifestyle a little bit, wanted to be in a new city, wanted to be doing new things. And I was like super hyped up and geared towards that because I was like, okay, like I've delayed my gratification for a pretty long time, in my lifestyle. So like I wanna upgrade my lifestyle a little bit. So I was like on track with that for months. I was like, on that road. And I think a lot of us, have these times in our life where we're just like, hey, I want to make this transition because I deserve this thing, right? But after really diving into this book, like it really just started to, kind of get me thinking, right? I was like, man, like I, really also want to make sure that I'm doing the right things now so I can put my company in the best position so I can be helping out the people that I'm serving in the best way 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. And so I recently had went to an incubator, um, and got the opportunity to work with an advertising agency. And so now I came up across this kind of conundrum. I was like, okay, like, should I make this large investment into my practice so I can serve the people that I'm helping at a higher level? Or should I raise my personal expenses and enjoy life a little bit more, living in a high rise and exploring DC and all these different things? And I was just like, man, this is a hard choice, right? I think a lot of us kind of come to grips with like short term, gratification versus long term gratification. But after reading this book and really thinking about, okay, like what is the true infinite play here? You know, what is the right thing to do to help, position the things that I'm doing in the best way possible over the next 5, 10 years. And so I had to make a sacrifice and told myself, hey, like I'm gonna delay this move delay this move and this transition to DC because I'm going to take this capital that I would have spent raising my expenses and putting it back into my practice so I can now serve my clients at a higher level. And I, after reading this book, it really changes your mindset to thinking about things like, again, in the short term versus the long term. And we're so drawn to short-term gratification, especially looking at social media, especially, we go see, all types of movies and all these different things. Well, the definition of success is now. Everyone wants it now. Everyone wants the immediate thing, right? But really creating this philosophy of how can I play the game to keep on playing so I can be in this as long term as possible? How can I serve in the best way that I can, make sure that I'm not just making a difference quarterly, but making a difference, in the lives of everyone I'm touching? Really just changes your mindset and the choices that you make. So that was a huge experience for me that this book really allowed me to see things just a little bit differently.
Yeah, man, I want to applaud you there, brother.
Yeah.
Because ultimately what you're saying is like, you know what? I'm going to play for something much greater than what Kofi right here, right now wants. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to think about the people that I could be reaching, the people that I could be help developing and putting them on a better track to have their financial plans and needs met. And it's honestly a very selfless thing to do, man,
Mm-hmm.
because you look at that money you're making, you're like, yeah, I could go allocate it on this sexy high rise,
Yeah.
Florida ceiling glass windows. I've been there, right? We
Mm-hmm.
all know how that game goes, but to strip yourself of the desires of the flesh and then take a step back,
Mm.
get some space and objectively think, okay, like, is this going to expand me towards what I ultimately am put here to do, or is this going to contract me? And to make a decision from that position is really, not only an embodiment of this infinite mindset theory that we've been discussing,
Yeah.
but it's also a true mark of you being a righteous individual, man. It really is. And you're only
Yeah.
what, 29 years old, 28 years old,
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
like that.
29. Yeah. So, you
Amazing,
know, and one of the
amazing,
things that
brother. Well done.
I really think is so powerful, is like, when Simon Sinek mentioned, as we had talked about, like, you know, a huge portion of leadership is how you lead yourself.
Yes.
And in embodying and having the integrity to lead an organization in the right direction, that a lot of times starts with, who we are as individuals and the choices that we make, whether it be within the business that we run, whether it be within our health choices, whether it be within the things that we consume and the things that we're doing on a daily basis, because all of that starts, that's where everything that's the foundation for all the other decisions that we're going to continue to make. So, for our listeners, I really, encourage, as you're like, leading different causes, whether you're a thought leader, whether you're running a business, whether you're, in an organization, um, it's important to also consider what are the choices you're making in your personal life as well, too. And are you, aligning with this philosophy of an infinite mindset, or are you aligning with the philosophy of a finite, mindset? I think it's really cool. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's just a really great objective rubric that
mm,
one can operate from to really audit if they are heading towards a path that they actually want, or if they're potentially deviating away from a path that they
mm,
want. And what really makes me excited about this book is, and what we're discussing here is, I think it'll hopefully help remove a lot of the blinders that we have sometimes
mm,
that kind of us ambivalent or on the fence, or not really knowing, where we are in relation to the things that we actually say that we want. So, I mean, I know I've been there many times in my life, bro. I know that I've been,
yeah.
take for instance, you know, the example of an intimate relationship. I know there have been
Hmm.
so many times where like I want an infinite or an infinite.
Yeah.
I want a relationship. I want to
Yeah.
be exclusive. want to be monogamous. But, if I looked and if I was able to chart my actions, they definitely weren't in alignment with the things that I said that I wanted, right? And it's
Mm.
because I was typically acting off of, lustful or,
I've been there.
temporary
Oh yeah.
desires of the flesh. Or you see what I'm saying? And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
in a mindset like this, it's not just a business perspective. You can also use it in like just day-to-day perspectives of situations like what I'm describing to go,
Yeah.
okay, Karl, you say you want this, but you're doing these things. Is it possible that you're playing a finite game right here?
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible that, entertaining multiple people at once is something that is leading you down a pathway to, a situation where there really is no viable path towards ultimately what you want? It's leading you to a dead end, And so for me, man, like this 75 hard challenge, today is day 28. I have been using this mindset to think about, all right, like, what do I want my life to be 3 months from now?
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Because that's kind of how I operate. I operate off of like 90 days from now. Where do I want things to be? How do I want things to look and feel? And how do I want to basically be operating? And I recognize that I needed to really scale back in terms of how I was spending money, in terms of who I was spending my time with, things that I was
Mm.
entertaining. So I've been, really working hard to embody this mindset to conduct myself in a way that actually aligns with my goals,
Mm-hmm.
90 days from now. And so here in Denver, a great example of this is,
Yeah.
whatever reason, the Kentucky Derby is just a big holiday here. It follows Cinco de Mayo. There's a thing called Derby Day. Everybody gets dressed to the nines. They're all out
Yeah.
probably right now looking at me. I mean, beautiful movers and shakers in this city. And I was invited to a couple parties, like a couple of like really nice parties to like just go and be seen. And
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I'm doing my program, how does 12 hours of just being around people that are getting heavily intoxicated and all
Yeah.
these different things, how does that serve me, A, be on this program, and B, where I want to be 90 days from now when I'm living in
Mm.
Switzerland and
Mhm.
this is where I go back to the book we just reviewed, The Courage to Be Disliked. Like I had to lean into the courage to be disliked and tell those people that invited me, you know what, like I'm not going to be available,
Yeah.
and be fine with that. And, sending those texts or, not even responding, it's sort of
Yeah.
felt like, man, like burning a bridge here. But you know what? You got to be open and fine to burning a bridge if that's where it's going to go with that particular relationship, because the worst bridge to burn is the one with yourself.
Yeah.
And it goes back to the concept of like
1000%.
self-leadership. You want to be a good leader, you got to start with being a good leader for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just done with, because I've done it a lot. I mean, and that's why I say kudos to you. Like when I was in my late 20s, even like I was still compromising what I wanted for what others wanted, or
Mm.
what I wanted for what my short-term self wanted.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'll say here is the thing that's really helped me is I think of, 32-year-old Karl right now as the player that's in the game for my squad. And what I mean by that is if you look at your life, and hopefully we're all here for like 90 plus years,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if your life in increments of decades, there are versions of you that are the current player for the current decade, so I'm in the third decade of my life. I've got the 32-year-old version in the game, right? And so as I think about the fourth decade version when I'm in my 40s, or even the fifth decade version when I'm in my 50s,
Yeah.
I want to make those guys that are part of my squad super proud of the work that I'm doing now that will allow them to
Mm.
just be at an insane level. I
Yeah.
actually had an insane meditative experience probably about 9 months ago. I had a Kundalini yoga experience where
Mm.
I literally was like transported into this space where I met the 47-year-old version of myself. And this guy, you know, he was a little bit more salt and
Ooh,
peppered. He had like
yeah,
a ton of on. He just looked really calm and at peace and at one with himself. You know, you ever meet somebody that just seems like such a gust of calm
yeah,
and calm? Like this dude
yeah.
exuded that. He caught my attention and I caught his attention. We had a conversation on the bench, and as I began to talk with him, I quickly realized like, oh wow, like that's me. And I asked him, I
Mm,
was like, hey man, like, how is it that you get to live the way that you live right now? And he looked at me and he like lowered his sunglasses. He had some really cool shades. He's like, young man, we get to live the way that you perceive us living today because of what you're doing right now. And I was just like,
mm.
damn,
That's powerful.
man.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thinking about your future self, whether it be 90 days from now
Yeah.
or 13 years from now, and working to operate and make the decisions that you feel are going to best serve those future versions, I found is a very powerful way to
Yeah.
adopt and actually implement this mindset.
Yeah. Wow. That's such a, thank you for sharing that. It's such a powerful, thing to do because what I realize, especially like in the world being a financial advisor, I oftentimes see like a lot of like short-sightedness, like, just looking at things in a very like short term, viewpoint, like really having like kind of again like a finite perspective and thinking about things only on like a daily, weekly, basis in that regard. Um, but having that courage, to truly be real with ourselves about, okay, like looking at the things that we're doing now, where is this going to take us down the road? What direction are we truly heading in? And like if that future for you, like you either, you don't like it or it's something that doesn't seem very good, doesn't really seem truly aligned, like we have to really be real for ourselves and say, hey, like I need to make a shift here. Like I know for me, like kind of going back to like dating. So I used to go out and just like, want to have fun, want to have like as many connections as possible. I wasn't really thinking about the implications of the people I was connecting with, wasn't really being intentional about the women that I would go on dates with. And, I realized that like, okay, like what is the end result of this? Like, is this truly like, serving, is this truly like allowing me to cultivate like a healthy relationship with myself? And is this allowing me to cultivate a healthy relationship with the person that I'm with and getting me to the goal of eventually having a family and being a father? Right.
Mm,
And I realized that like, okay, like, I can, potentially still go out and still have fun, but I need to do it in a healthy way. I need to do it in a way that I'm being very transparent with the person that I'm with, still
mhm,
building a healthy, conscious relationship, because building a
mhm.
healthy, conscious relationship is, the direction that I want to go in. And
Yeah.
really being intentional and understanding that like we're always taking steps in some direction. Like we're either taking steps in a direction that's not leading us where we want to go, or we're taking steps in a direction that is leading us in where we want to go. And in the moment, like we're very pulled by our id, to kind of quote like Sigmund Freud, we're very pulled by our id to usually do the things that like are just, our desires, like, that are just, that release the quickest dopamine hit, or kind of just, really give us a short-term burst of pleasure. But to pull ourselves back and start operating from like our ego, that's where like this infinite mindset comes. It's like, okay, like how can we position ourselves to truly be aligned with that person that we see? And I love the fact that you talked about visualizing that, because that's such a powerful thing. It's like, okay, like what does, that future Karl look like? What does the
Mm.
future of, streamlined media look like? What does the future of all these different aspects of your life, like, what does this look like? And then I like to say, reverse engineering that, and all right, doing the things today in order to get there. Like, it's such a like cheat code, to truly
Yeah.
live like a great life.
Yeah. No, it really is, man. And if you're listening to this and in theory it's making sense, but you're wondering, okay, like what's the practical takeaway so I can
Yeah.
begin to like put this into action. I think it's exactly what Kofi just mentioned, and it's sitting down, after you've moved your body when you're in a peak energy state. Like, don't do this hungover or,
Yeah.
not feeling good.
Hmm.
Sit down with a piece of paper and allow yourself to remove the cap or the ceiling in terms of your mindset, and, think 3 or 5 years down the road. If it's too daunting to think 10 plus years, think 3 or 5, or even 2 to 3, and begin to write what your ideal day looks like. This is something I
Hmm.
did years ago, and I'm actually living it right now. I mean, the other day I had a pinch myself moment. I'm like getting up,
Yeah.
doing a really holistic wellness
I
regimen,
love it.
taking calls in my Lululemon, like empowering my team,
Yeah.
going and meeting somebody for coffee around 10 a.m. when everybody else is like heads down, coming back, reading,
Hmm.
taking some high level, like these are things that I wrote. You see what I'm saying? And
Mm.
they're happening. So as I think about 2 to 3 years from now and where I'm going to be and all these different things, like I already know it's going to happen because it's already happened. Like what I asked for or what I designed was already constructed or has already been constructed. And you really start to compound this level of confidence and belief in your ability to, some might call it, manifest these experiences into this dimension of life.
Hmm.
Somebody that Kofi and I both know very well that talks a lot about this is our dear friend Dan Mangana. You'll find
Yeah.
him on Instagram at the official Dan Mangana. I'll be with Dan this summer, going all around Europe, and he's done this time and time again, and he speaks to it in such a visceral manner to where it just like locks in, and it's like,
Hmm.
duh, like that makes sense. So I think that's like a good way to do it. I don't know if you have anything
Yeah.
else to add to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and this really comes in straight from the book, but he talks about how, the result of leaders playing like a finite mindset is, the failure for them to envision the future of the business as like the world changes around them. And I
Yeah,
believe on the personal level, like being able to envision the world or being able to envision the future of yourself as the world changes around you is so important, because the reality is like, stagnancy, in like any, respect, whether it's like, if it's a organism that doesn't move or an organism that doesn't change, like, or something that doesn't evolve, it's gonna die at some point. That's the reality. Like if you're not, you know constantly like optimizing or shifting, like you're going to essentially expire at some point. You're going to have, that expiration date. And you
yeah,
know, that's a real thing about life. Like we've all seen people that are just stuck in the past. They are, in this
yeah,
position where they have not changed for, years or decades. And the only thing they can do is sit there and say, oh, I remember when times were good, or I remember the golden days. And they just, they talk about all these different things that used to be,
right,
hoping that the world's going to somehow reverse back to that older period.
right,
That's like, that's not, you got to move through the shifting times. Like, as you're getting, older, as you're, growing in different ways, taking on new skills, taking on new things to continue to operate in this new environment. Like we understand that, like, and look at evolution, right? Anything that didn't evolve with the changing environments died.
yep,
So I think it's so important to really, again, like bring ourselves back into our current reality while also being able to see how we're going to operate in the future reality, if in our lives personally and in our business and in our relationships, so on and so forth there.
yeah, yeah. I mean, really, what it is it's a growth mindset, and it's
Facts. Yeah.
um, an ability to become comfortable challenging one's assumptions, and I think that's one of the current downfalls of our civilization and of mankind today is
Mm.
this inability or this lack of desire to challenge assumptions and embrace new ideas and new approaches.
Yeah.
I
Have
know
you
that there's
Have you
Go
had any
ahead.
experiences recently where you had to kind of challenge your mindset a little bit, or kind of break out maybe of
Yeah,
limited
yeah,
space,
no,
something?
for
Yeah.
sure, for sure. I mean, I'm just being called today to share a little bit more of my personal side. I know we talk a lot about business, 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 but like
Yeah.
on the personal side, of things, I mean, I had a therapy session the other day where
Mm-hmm.
the therapist was like, I mean, are you, or could it be possible that like you're like an abuser of women? And
Mm,
I sat back and,
yeah.
the inclination was to kind of get defensive, but I was like, okay, like, let me challenge my mindset and see where he's going with this. And for the listeners, not like physically abusive or verbally
Mm-hmm.
abusive, like that's not
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
my DNA. But I have a lot from my childhood that has caused me to not really trust people in intimate situations, and that has
Mm,
caused me to
mm-hmm.
build relationships and then basically like discard them because
Mm,
of my in go further. And so
yeah.
it sort of creates the scenario where you portray and present yourself as one thing only to let the person down on the back end because
Mm,
you really
mm-hmm.
had no desire of following through on that thing that you quote unquote sold them on. and
Yeah.
and and that leads to a trauma, that leads to a form of neglect and abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And so this was just the other day. This was like, I think on Wednesday, I'm sitting down with him and he's like challenging me. And I mean, to answer your question, yeah, man, I had to like sit there. And one of the things that I struggle with, that I'm sure a lot of us as human beings do, is like, I don't like negative labels being associated with me.
Yeah.
Like there's just a
Oh yeah.
natural, there's a natural resistance to that, to where I want to back up. But that can create a blind spot if you are indeed embodying those labels. It doesn't mean that you are that thing, but you
Yeah.
can be embodying that thing. That can be a part of yourself.
I think that's a very important point right there. It's like we may do a negative thing, but that doesn't mean we're a negative person. Like
Right.
it's separating the action from who
Right.
we are truly.
There's a
Yeah.
big separation. There's a big line in the sand there. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, man, like I had to swallow some stuff and go, okay, well, looking at my dating history objectively
Mm-hmm.
and auditing how I've ended certain relationships objectively, yeah, I have exhibited traits of being an abuser of women.
Mm.
And I can like saying this out loud, but like, yeah. And so that was something that I had to challenge myself on, in working to implement and embody an infinite mindset to ultimately stay in alignment with being the righteous man that I know that I am. Like the righteous man is going to look at the error of his ways and be willing, no matter how difficult or uncomfortable those errors are, to own them and then to learn and, ultimately become better as a
Mm-hmm.
result.
Yeah.
And you don't get there without being willing to like challenge that mindset. It would be easier to be like, no, I'm not an abuser. I mean, I'm a
Yeah.
great guy. I got all these qualities and this, and just like look at one side of it versus the other side of it. So yeah, brother.
I believe, wow, I want to acknowledge you for having the courage to do that because, again, like just going back to that negative label, like a lot of people, shy away from that, or, they get defensive, but actually being really honest about how our actions can be impacting, others is very, like mature thing to actually do. A lot of people just don't get to that point within our personal lives, within our businesses. And it just again it leads to this like disconnection with like reality, or we're completely disconnected from like what things truly are, and we decide to tell ourselves a narrative. And I think I was reading Malcolm Gladwell. Well, people have this like huge tendency to, justify every single action that we do. And I believe when, going back to having an infinite mindset, you have to really step away from trying to justify, being righteous and trying to be, be right. It really requires this ability to seek truth over being right, and
Mhm.
seeing, things as true, not worrying about, okay, what's right or wrong is such like an important, quality to have, like, whether you are a leader or not, because I believe that like if you are trying to seek being right in situations, there's no way to truly actually change. There's no way to actually truly like, evolve to like another level. But if you're seeking truth, and when we're seeking truth, we don't have to describe this thing as good or bad, right? You don't have to go through and shame yourself for doing the thing. You don't have to, go through and like, just feel really bad for doing it. But like, okay, what is the truth of this situation? And then when I know the truth, then I can act in accordance with the truth and either change this action I'm taking if this truth of this situation isn't what I truly want to embody or what the true vision has. I can now change the situation. But if we just, yeah, completely disconnect from that, like it's really difficult to
Mm.
actually, take an action in the right direction. So yeah, I want to acknowledge you for that. And, for our listeners as well, like really being like, honest with ourselves. And also too, like part of that is like just sometimes just looking at things from another perspective and even just entertaining it. Like, because that doesn't like you can still entertain an idea and not necessarily have to accept that belief. And I think it requires a like, a really strong like value system. It requires like you to really be solid in your foundation. But like just going to that place and entertaining that idea and seeing, okay, like can there be aspects of this that can be seen as that? And like in some way this, can be true. And like you don't necessarily have to internalize that and now just be like, oh my God, like I'm a terrible person, and, really go inward and stop, performing the way that you should be performing. Um, but being able to like entertain that idea just allows you to see things from a different perspective and, possibly make a different choice. But I noticed for a lot of people, like it's even just difficult for them to like even just like contemplate or think about that thing. Um, that could be, negative or could not be wanted. But I realized that for, in my own life, like, you know, kind of going back to this huge investment I made in my, business and my practice, like it was definitely a large investment to make for me. And I was like, okay, like, is this the right thing to do now? Like am I, on the right track? And it was actually funny because I had a conversation with Dan McGenna about this, and he was like, okay, like, is this thing that you're doing leading you in the direction of where you want to go? And so coming from that perspective, I was able to actually, make the decision not based off just finances, like, okay, like, you know, am I operating from a scarcity mindset here and all these different things that were coming up for me, but like, is this action I'm taking in the direction where I want to go? And
Right.
entertaining that idea allowed me to make a decision that was more optimal for the future. So
Yeah.
I really think that's like cool, just being able to like take a step back and look at things from different perspectives.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope y'all are like enjoying this as much as part of why I love these conversations with Kofi is it is a breath of fresh air from all the chaos in the world to
Mm,
really get centered and have a true layer of intimate connection that
mm,
get me thinking.
yeah.
What you just said about seeking truth and prioritizing that over being right. I think we need to like put that in the title of this one.
Yeah. We
Are you trying to be right more than you're actually wanting the truth? I think that's the key to changing one's life.
yeah,
Like what side of the fence you're on there. Like the truth side, which you give anything enough time, the truth will ultimately prevail. Or
yes.
this this vanity aspect of wanting to be right.
Mm,
I mean, I think I kind of want to end it there, man. Like
dude,
that I love people to kind of go and ponder that one. That is gold. I just wrote that and highlighted it twice times two on my
I love
sheet.
it.
And you know, that's good,
So
Kofi.
much. There's a lot there. There's a lot.
Kofi, sign us off, man.
Awesome. Guys, thank you for tuning in to another awesome episode of Coffee with Karl and Kofi. Feel free to like, subscribe, share the episode. We always love feedback as well too. We're always doing the thing, and we want this to really be a place where we can have these conversations and really be diving into just different topics to help us think a little bit differently. So if you guys want to share a comment or share some other experience in your life that maybe you've thought about just a little bit differently, or seen a different perspective, some way this has benefited you, we always love to hear the feedback. So we will see you guys soon on Coffee of Karl and Kofi.
Much love, y'all.